As for Katy, she came forward, stamping and champing, ready to snatch it and tread it under her feet. The face of Katy was a tiger's face. Just as she reached the cross, the sharp shadow of it fell on her face, and the cross itself was reflected in her yellow eyes. Katy stopped, paralyzed. The air, the tree, the earth shuddered in expectant silence, while goodness fought with sin. Then, slowly, two great tears squeezed out of the eyes of Katy, and before you could think, she was stretched prostrate on the ground, making the sign of the cross with her right hoof, and mooing softly in anguish at the realization of her crimes. Brother Paul dangled the cross a full minute before he hoisted himself back on the limb. All this time Rourke had been watching from his gate. From that day on he was no longer a bad man. His whole life was changed in a moment. Indeed, he told the story over and over to anyone who would listen. Rourke said he had never seen anything so grand and inspiring in his life. Brother Paul rose and stood on the limb. He drew himself to his full height. Then, using his free hand for gestures, Brother Paul delivered the Sermon on the Mount in beautiful Latin to the groveling, moaning Katy under the tree. When he finished, there was complete and holy silence except for the sobs and sniffles of the repentant pig. It is doubtful whether Brother Colin had the fibre of a true priest militant in his nature. Do you think it is safe to go down now?" he stammered. For answer, Brother Paul broke a limb from the thorn tree and threw it at the recumbent sow. Katy sobbed aloud and raised a tear-stained countenance to them, a face from which all evil had departed. The yellow eyes were golden with repentance and the resulting anguish of grace. The brothers scrambled out of the tree, put the cord through Katy's nose ring, and down the road they trudged with the redeemed pig trotting docilely behind them. News that they were bringing home a pig from Rourke caused such excitement that on arriving at the gates of M, Brother Paul and Colin found a crowd of monks awaiting them. The brotherhood squirmed about, feeling the fat sides of Katy and kneading her jowls. Suddenly an opening was broken in the ring, and Father Benedict paced through. His face wore such a smile that Colin was made sure of his sausage and Paul of his praise. Then, to the horror and consternation of everyone present, Katy waddled to a little font beside the chapel door, dipped her right hoof in holy water, and crossed herself. It was a moment before anyone spoke. Then Father Benedict's stern voice rang out in anger. "Who was it converted this pig?" Brother Paul stepped forward. "I did it, Father." "You are a fool," said the abbot. "A fool? I thought you would be pleased, Father." "You are a fool," Father Benedict repeated. "You can't slaughter this pig. This pig is a Christian." "There is more rejoicing in heaven," Brother Paul began to quote. "Hush!" said the abbot. "There are plenty of Christians this year. There's a great shortage of pigs." It would take a whole volume to tell of the thousands of sick beds Katy visited, and of the comfort she carried into palaces and cottages. She sat by the beds of pain, and her dear golden eyes brought relief to the sufferers. For a while it was thought that, because of her sex, she should leave the monastery and enter a nunnery, for the usual ribald tongues caused the usual scandal in the country. But, as the abbot remarked, one need only look at Katy to be convinced of her purity. The subsequent life of Katy was one long record of good deeds. It was not till one feast day morning, however, that the brothers began to suspect that their community harbored a secret. On the morning in question, while hymns of joy and thanksgiving sounded from 100 pious mouths, Katy rose from her seat, strode to the altar, and with a look of seraphic transport on her face, spun like a top on the tip of her tail 1 hour and 3/4. The assembled brothers looked on with astonishment and admiration. This was a wonderful example of what a saintly life could accomplish. From that time on, M became a place of pilgrimage. Long lines of travelers wound into the valley and stopped at taverns kept by the good brothers. Daily at 4 o'clock, Katy emerged from the gates and blessed the multitudes. If any were afflicted by scrofula or trichina or trichina, she touched them, and they were healed. 50 years after her death to a day, she was added to the calendar of the elect. The proposition was put forward that she should be called Saint Katy the Virgin, However, a minority argued that Katy was not a virgin, since she had, in her sinful days, produced a litter. The opposing party retorted that it made no difference at all. Very few virgins, so they said, were virgins. To keep dissension out of the monastery, a committee presented the problem to a fair-minded and vastly learned barber, agreeing beforehand to be guided by his decision. "It is a delicate question," said the barber. "You might say there are two kinds of virginity. Some hold that virginity consists of a little bit of tissue. If you have it, you are. If you haven't, you aren't. This definition is a grave danger on the basis of our religion, since there is nothing to differentiate between the grace of God knocking it out from the inside, or the wickedness of man from the outside. On the other hand," he continued, "there is virginity by intent, and this definition admits the existence of a great